Hi, this is Freddie Spencer reporting after the 2017 Australian Grand Prix in Phillip Island. Now, Phillip Island is one of my favorite circuits. In fact, I remember the first time I went there, it was the beginning of 1989 before the first Australian Grand Prix, and we were doing some testing. And I was amazed by the beauty of the circuit. You feel like you literally are down at the bottom of the world. And with the beautiful views of the ocean, I thought a couple of things. One is that if it does get windy, it's certainly going to make it tricky because it's a high-speed circuit. The other is the change of weather, which is exactly what we got that weekend. This past weekend. The other thing that I loved about it was the first time that I'd heard about this, the penguin parade, which is when the penguins come in. They leave at a certain time of day and they come in from the ocean at the end of the day. And back in those days, you could actually go out and watch them, and there was really no one there because we were there during the week testing, and stand there and watch these little bitty penguins that come in, and they just walk right by you, and it was an amazing thing. I remember it so well. It was, like I said, one of the most powerful things I've ever seen. And nowadays, you can still go down and watch them, but there's restrictions as anything that happens. It becomes so popular. But anyway, the circuit was also something that I was looking forward to racing on. Again, because it's high speed, and high-speed circuits really, they're challenging for the rider, and they're certainly challenging for the crew when you're trying to get the bike set up. And it will show up some weaknesses that you may have with the bike and characteristics of the bike, as we saw this weekend with the Ducatis. That was certainly on display. But it's a racetrack, like I said, that a lot of riders love. In fact, most riders would say today it's one of their favorite. And again, because of the incredible different challenges and just beautiful part of the world. In practice, we saw, as we've seen so many times over these last few years, and certainly this year, the change of weather. It's a time of year in Australia where you're starting to make that transition from spring into the summer months, and because of being below the equator. And so you got that real change of weather. And again, on a track like that is a challenge anyway. And being high speed, those conditions, wet conditions, certainly put a lot of emphasis on the rider's ability to be able to be precise, as well as being able to get the bike set up. You know, with the modern electronics, as we've talked about before, the bikes are certainly easier. You can adapt them to those change conditions through mapping, the electronic mapping, which affects the horsepower, where the power comes in at a certain RPM, as well as the spinning. You can control that so much easier today. Of course, back in my day, and before electronics, it was all up to the rider and what they feel in their hands and their ability to be able to anticipate the lean angle and be able to feel the bike when the power is coming in. And back with two strokes, that certainly was a challenge because of the unpredictability of the way the power would come in and hit, called the power band. But the riders were put up with that challenge, or had the challenge on Friday, and it was interesting because we kind of I suspected that you would see Dovi up there, and that might benefit him, knowing that the characteristics or some things they were struggling with, or have been struggling with on the Ducati, would show up, and that's the mid-corner direction change. And so the weather conditions, if it would have stayed a little bit more iffy, or if it had been raining, I think that would have been certainly better for Dovi than it was in the race. But the rider up top was in qualifying was Márquez, and by the time Saturday rolled around, the conditions were pretty good in the afternoon, and there really wasn't a problem. But you could see that the Yamahas seemed to be a little better or this weekend in the wet conditions, but in the dry conditions, not too sure. Maverick Vinales, though, put in a good qualifying run. He got second behind Mark, and Valentino had to come through qualifying 1, actually, to get into qualifying 2, and ended up in the top 6. And the KTM's, another good run for them. They've really shown that they've come along and got a more rounded package. The bike seems to be, certainly since they went to the Big Bang engine in the beginning of the year, they've certainly seemed to work through some of their chassis issues, and the bike is performing much better. Paul Esparga's there, and even Bradley Smith, which is great to see Bradley up there. After qualifying, it looked like that it was going to be certainly Mark that had the upper hand going in this weekend. After last weekend, Dovi closing up the gap to 11 points. And the race, the beginning of the race certainly showed that. I mean, who would have thought that you would see Dovi, Danny Petrosa, and Jorge Lorenzo out of the top 10? I mean, they were battling for 11th, 12th, 13th. And in fact, Jorge was a little farther back. Now, Dovi did make that mistake early in the race, going into doing corner or turn 1, where he ran wide and got all the way back to 20th position. But you certainly thought he would have been up there and closer to the front. But like I said earlier, the characteristics of the Ducati that Jorge's been talking about, struggling with, even back when Valentino, is really what affected Valentino being able to do well on the Ducati, mid-corner direction change. And what that is, basically, is a motorcycle. We're running these bikes into corners where we're drifting the front and the rear wheel constantly, even on turning, even if it's so slight. And basically, the mid-corner, the bike has to make a direction change. Left-hand corner, right-hand corner is... If the bike will not turn at maximum lean angle, the only choice the rider has is to be able to slow down and wait for the front of the motorcycle to turn back. So then that way you have this move under acceleration where it's kind of dropping, you pick the bike up and you begin to accelerate. But if before that the bike won't turn, the rider has to wait. And that's where the Ducati is struggling, and has been struggling for a long time. Now, Casey Stoner before, what he was good at, which is exactly what Mark is good at, is using the rear of the motorcycle and manipulating it to help rotate it. Rotate the chassis around or the bike around. Mark does it so well and enter the corner. Casey could do it mid-corner, and you had really good feel to anticipate that. And that's what it is. It's a rider's ability to being able to anticipate the slide, be able to control, making the bike lose grip, and then gather it back. And that's the trick, is being able to recover from that adjustment, or manipulating the bike's direction change. And on a high-speed circuit like Phillip Island, where you're over on the side of the tire for so long at such high speed in those big corners, if the bike won't make that direction change, not talking about like in the hairpin, like in a Honda corner, that's fine. Or in Motegi, where it's a lot of stop and go, or these corners. But on big corners, like at a track like Phillip Island, where you're over there and you're trying to control the bike's movement, once it settles in, the Ducati won't seem to turn back mid-corner. And again, the rider has to slow the bike down to wait for it. And it's basically the time and distance recovering. If it's a little too long, you don't have a choice. Corners don't go on forever. So you got to get that bike in the position to be able to accelerate. And they struggle. And that could be the championship. Mark rode a great race. But to me, the interesting part about it was what happened toward the end, when you had Annoni and Zarco battling for podium positions. And it's like Valentino said afterwards, they were like watching a Moto2 race, and it's just their aggression level. And the fact that they weren't intimidated to run with Valentino or to challenge for that. And we know Zarco, his aggressiveness has affected it a little bit early in the season. We talked about that. But he's maintained and stayed there, and he rode just a great race. And in fact, Annoni, when he went around Maverick Vinales, Maverick could have maybe even finished better than third, but he kind of got tangled up there with about 3 or 4 laps to go. Annoni really made an aggressive pass around the outside, if you remember seeing in the race, that almost took Maverick out, and that dropped him back. But it was really great to see him come back. He didn't let it discourage him, and he came back, and like I said, almost got Valentino there, finished third. But the interesting thing that made me smile was watching Valentino, because with Zarco and Annoni so aggressive, you wondered if he was going to try pushing back, and he did. And he said afterwards that he was as stupid as they were, is what he called it. But it was more just, I think he was having fun. And like he said, if you want to be in the game, that's how it's played now, or stay at home. And there's no doubt that it makes it interesting. And to see those guys battling like that, wheel to wheel, reminded me of my flat tracking days when I was a kid. That's how it was on Friday night racing. You just get in there and battle and kind of nudge people around, and except they're doing it at 150 miles an hour. So you got to trust the guy you're racing against. But like I said, it put on a great show for everyone. But as far as the championship goes, it looks like Mark has it pretty much under control with 33 points, 2 races to go. So this weekend at Singapore is going to be a critical one for Dovi. And basically the only choice that he has, or chance he has, is he's going to have to hope that Mark has an issue of some kind. Maybe doesn't finish, because Mark can wrap it up this weekend if he finishes in Dovi, probably in the top 3, even if Dovi finishes up there. But it's certainly going to be interesting, and hopefully we'll have another great race like we had at Phillip Island. I'm looking forward to this weekend at Singapore at the Malaysian Grand Prix. Hope you're watching too.